So the hat started as a research project, £1.2 million funded by the RCUK at that time, Digital Economy Programme. 7 professors in all, 6 universities. We really wanted to talk about how the data economy was going to be in future internet. And we finished the project in 2015, and we gave a set of guidance, 6 papers on how the personal data economy could be redesigned. And then looked at the 6 papers and said, no one's going to do it. So we then thought, okay, fine, we're going to do it ourselves. So in 2015-16, we launched 2 companies, the Hat Community Foundation and Hat Data Exchange. So essentially what a hat is a microserver. Now, many people don't understand what we mean by a hat microserver, because the word microserver can mean other types of technology. But a hat microserver, we define it as a database which is wrapped around with services, and services that you control. So the hat is sitting up in the cloud with services around the database. And because it's you, it can form a universal user account for apps. So if you're an app and you have to build an app, why bother to have a user account? Just give your customer a hat. And if you give the person a hat, he cannot just put his email and other stuff in. He can also, because it's owned by him and controlled by him, do other things with it. And so a hat microserver, therefore, can actually then be used to gather different kinds of data into the hat that I can reuse and reshare with other apps. And this is incredibly important because most of the apps that we sign on to trap these little bits of data into these apps. You can't free them. You can't reshare and reuse them even if you want to. The hat solves that. And by being able to reuse and reshare, the hat data itself becomes a form of currency. And why is it important as a form of currency that you can just share? Because as a form of currency, you can spend or you can use it real time, on demand, anywhere. So it's a little bit like having a lot of US dollars, but it's at home in a safe. If you go to the shopping center, you want to spend, your money is in the safe. Well, that's the problem with all our data right now. They're sort of trapped everywhere else. They're precious, but they're not usable by us whenever we want to. By liberating it into the hat, if you walk into a shopping center or if you walk into a mall, a shop, and you say, oh, these are nice dresses. I've got my body dimension. Can I ping you so that you can give me a set of recommendations? Can I spend my data and get a set of recommendations and personalizations back? Therefore, hat data becomes like US dollar, pound sterling. The hat microserver becomes like a wallet or a credit card, which you can take and use it with any app, any company you wish. So let me tell you a little bit about how the microserver is set up. You want to bring data in, say from Spotify or Facebook. So it's like mining your own data out there. And you can do that. You can do that with plugs. And then you want to take some of that data and give it to some apps. But at the same time, inside the hat, we have what we call a smart hat engine. Now, a smart hat engine can install interesting algorithms, AI, machine learning stuff, pre-trained, and it analyzes your data and it comes out with a new set of data. So for example, it analyzes all your location from last week and it creates a new data that says 30% of your location data last week was in green spaces. So that's a new data, and it keeps it in your hat. And because it creates a new type of data, which we call SHE data, Smart Hat Engine data, apps can now ask you for it. So they cannot just ask you for data that you've already out on the internet. They can ask you data that has been a derivative of or a second order or something better than whatever is data, analyzed data. Because of that, the new apps that are built on the hat, they don't need data science capabilities. They don't need AI capabilities. They can just ask their customer to give them signals and insight. So these are apps. And the tools that are put in by data scientists from every university that's interested in the hat ecosystem. And if the data scientist creates a tool that is used by an app, the data scientist gets royalties. So how we built the platform infrastructure is around the permissions, the legal rights of the person, the exchange model, the economic ability for these different kinds of data from time, space, places to be rebundled and changed and exchanged any way you want. So there's a legal model, there is a permissions model, exchange model, economic model, and a technology model, all ready for any app that wants to access personal data. And what we do with the Hat Accelerator is to ask everybody, let's build a new generation of apps on the hat, and you can be tools or apps or plugs. So to us, it's more tools, more apps, more plugs. Better tools make better apps, makes better data. More plugs make better apps and better tools. And it just reinforces itself and starts growing. I think because the hat runs very much a decentralized model of ownership, but centralized model of security to some extent, there is competition in a decentralized world. For example, blockchains do something very similar, more around more critical transactional data. You also have services that offer, there are services out there that offer individuals the ability to control their own data. And so in a decentralized world, there should be an entire ecosystem, a supply chain model, where there are some who give services as a solution, platform as a solution. Hats are infrastructure. We do not get involved in the relationship between the app and their customers. We're just powered by the hat, small little words underneath. And at infrastructure level, I think Tim Berners-Lee's Solid Server is in that space. There are not many who sits at the infrastructure level. But at the service level, there are quite a few companies that operate personal data stores and personal data control solutions. The hat has one motivation. It is something that the foundation carries very close to their heart, which is the hat aims to make the individual person valuable on the internet, to make the digital person valuable. And the more valuable the person is, because all his data is under his control, the more precious his data is, the more valuable his data is, the more economically powerful the person is. It's like you having a lot of money. If you spend on the brand, that's purchasing power. Purchasing power is able to discipline companies and brands, make sure they do the right thing, because otherwise you won't buy from them. If you control the data and you control how it's used, you have power to shape and influence the data economy. And that's what the hat is. Hat Data Exchange finds all sorts of ways to get you to spend your hat data. You will invite partners, invite apps, find ways to get personalization, recommendation to you, because your hat data really shouldn't just be sitting in your hat doing nothing. The economy should be moving around better data exchanges for early detection of depression, all sorts of societal well-being. And to get a system that's safe to spend the data for personalization and recommendation, HatDex will try to introduce new apps, new partners, and new services so that your data can be spent better and makes the data economy healthier. So blockchains are a very interesting piece of technology which is really useful for transactional data. If the last number of your passport number changes, you're a completely different person. If the last number of your Fitbit steps changes, doesn't really matter very much. But a lot of the internet's data are those kind of data. The music you listen to, browsing habits, lots of that. So I think there's a role for blockchains in much more immutable transactional data like identity and asset records. But the rest, the things you do, the persona, stuff you buy, what you browse, what you like, those are what we call relational data, and that's better handled by the hat microserver because of the smart hat engine that can do all sorts of analysis and ping more interesting data or create interesting data out of it. So in a way, I think the hat microserver is more flexible and it's more powerful to be able to deal with relational data and different kinds of exchange relationships, whereas blockchain has a different purpose on transactional data. So the hat isn't directly trying to solve a privacy issue. The hat is saying that we should have control and power on the internet through our ownership of an asset, which is our personal data, that on the hat is in some way converted into currency that can be easily spent. And so we do want you to spend it, and that gives you more power, like you get purchasing power through currency. So in that sense, it's not a privacy solution. But we believe that if you give individuals sufficient economic power, they have therefore the right to punish bad players and reward good players. And perhaps then indirectly you could solve a privacy problem by punishing those players who do not handle data and privacy well. So the internet started very much in a decentralized way. Every node, every person, every website was pretty much the same. And today we now have a lot of centralized systems. You know, social media is centralized around Facebook, search is centralized around Google. And that's not great for innovation. But you can't blame these companies for centralizing because it's efficient, it's more optimized. And I honestly think that the internet has to run a hybrid system as a mirror of the real world. It has to run both centralized and decentralized systems. For example, in the real world, no one strips you naked and put on clothes for you every night because it's really private. You should really do that yourself. I mean, if you can, if not too old and doddery, you really should do that yourself. And you should take your own baths and showers yourself. You know, stuff that gets to see you naked, you should be doing yourself, right? And then you walk out and you realize there are other things you want other people to do for you. You know, you want maybe people to help you write something. You call on different services. But the internet is peculiar. You can't do anything yourself. Even the most private thing, your private photograph is taken on an Apple phone. It's weird that way. It's like I have a butler, he's changing me, but it's okay, he's not looking. It's weird that way. So to have some assets that you can be private in, to have private spaces on the internet, is to say there are some services that should be decentralized to what I can do myself, but also engaged on the internet with services that are centralized as well. So you have decentralized services and you have centralized services. The way we are individually decentralized, but we have families, communities, countries. We belong to centralized systems and decentralized systems. And what the hat tries to do is to have a good scaffold between a decentralized system and a centralized system in some way that creates a hybrid that makes a better functioning democratic society on the internet as well as in physical spaces that interact with digital spaces. So the real ambition of the hat is hats should always be a public good. They should always become a new standard on the internet. And that's why hats are open sourced. HatDex makes its money from money or data sloshing around, moving around. But hats itself should be a public good. And it should be a private space that we can have so that we have the same capabilities, bots, AI and everything, as companies. And when we deal with other companies and other communities and governments on the internet, we deal with them in a level playing field in terms of power. So the real ambition of the internet is just to be more democratic, more level in terms of playing fields, and just a better civil society.